Hello everybody. We really hope you're enjoying National Storytelling Week and you're enjoying all the stories that we're sharing with you. We'd love to hear all about your favourite stories as well. The story I'm going to read you now is a bit like a fairy story, and you might have heard something similar before with a frog and a princess in it. But this is called Prince Ribbit, and it's all about whether a frog can really turn into a prince. And Prince Ribbit is written by Jonathan Emmett and Poly Bernatene, and it's published by Macmillan. There we go. And so the princess and the frog prince got married, and they lived happily ever after, read Princess Arabella, closing the book with a satisfied sigh. Princess Lucinda frowned. That silly girl treated the frog prince so badly she was lucky to marry him. If I ever met a talking frog, I wouldn't make the same mistake, agreed Arabella. Princess Martha rolled her eyes. She liked facts more than fairy tales, and real frogs more than enchanted ones. She'd heard a real frog croaking in the royal pond, but she could never spot him. He's a clever little thing, thought Martha. Martha was right. The frog was very clever indeed. He often listened in on the sisters' stories, and the more he heard of princes and princesses, the more he longed to live like one. The frog dreamed of sleeping in a soft bed and eating fine foods and wearing a beautiful crown, and he'd just come up with a clever plan to make his dream come true. Yuck! Go away, you slimy little beast, shrieked Arabella and Lucinda as the frog hopped out in front of them. But instead of jumping into the pond, the frog cleared his throat and he spoke. Allow me to introduce myself, said the cunning frog. My name is Prince Ribbit. Arabella and Lucinda stared open-mouthed, but Martha was delighted. It's a frog, she said. A talking frog. A jealous wizard turned me into a frog because I was so astonishingly handsome, said Prince Ribbit. If there was only a way to break the spell. But there is, cried Lucinda. It's in this book. You just need to be looked after by a pretty princess like me. Oh, a pretty princess like me, said Arabella, and then you'll turn back into your old, astonishing, handsome self, and we can live happily ever after. Lucinda and Arabella took Prince Ribbit back to the palace and gave him whatever he wanted. Lucinda let him sleep on her pillow, and Arabella let him eat from her plate. But the more Princess Martha saw of the frog, the more suspicious she came. Why are you making such a fuss of him? She asked, as Prince Ribbit hopped around the dinner table. Look at that. All over the food. Because he's an enchanted prince, said Arabella, and that's how you break the spell. Just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's true, said Martha. And with that, she went to the Royal Library to find out more about frogs. A mummy frog lays eggs, she explained to her sisters. Then the eggs turn into tadpoles and the tadpoles turn into frogs, but frogs don't ever turn into princes. Well, just because you read it in a book, it doesn't mean it's true, replied her sisters. So the princesses continued to pamper Prince Ribbit, and they let him sleep in the biggest, softest bed. And they gave him the finest clothing and a beautiful new crown. Martha was the only person who saw Prince Ribbit for what he really was. "You may be very clever, but you're just an ordinary frog," she insisted. "Just because you read it in a book doesn't mean it's true," said Prince Ribbit cheekily. Oh, it's very cheeky, isn't it? "This is hopeless," thought Martha. "My sisters will never believe me, no matter how many books of facts I show them. But I suppose I'm just as bad. I never look at their storybooks. Perhaps I should." So Martha gathered a big pile of fairy tales and she began to read them. She was surprised to find that while stories might not be true, they were often funny and exciting and inspiring. And after Martha had read them all, she knew exactly how to deal with Prince Ribbit. You see all the different stories she's read. Red Riding Hood and Robin Hood, there's lots of them. Pinocchio. If you really are an enchanted prince, why hasn't the spell been broken yet?" asked Martha the next morning. Prince Ribbit shifted uneasily in his little golden throne and he adjusted his crown. Perhaps it's because I've not been treated well enough," he suggested. "You seem very well treated to me," said Martha. "I think it's time to try something different. What's the one thing that will always break an evil spell?" "True love's kiss," said Arabella and Lucinda excitedly. "Me first," said Princess Arabella, planting a big wet smacker on Prince Ribbit's clammy cheek. Don't think he enjoyed that. "You don't love him as much as I do," said Princess Lucinda, snatching the frog from her sister and squashing his face in a passionate smooch. But no matter how many kisses they gave him, Prince Ribbit remained very much a frog. And in the end, both princesses realised that this was all he'd ever been and all he'd ever be. "I suppose I should go back to my pond," said the frog, taking off his beautiful crown, but he looked so sad that Martha couldn't help feeling very sorry for him. "Please don't go," she said kindly. "Any animal smart enough to fool my sisters would be fun to have around. And while I might not want a handsome prince as a husband, I'd love to have a clever frog as a friend." And she picked the frog up and gave him a gentle kiss. The instant Martha kissed him, there was a huge puff of pink smoke and the frog turned into a handsome prince. In fact, he was so handsome that Martha decided that she did want to marry him after all. So she jumped into his arms and they lived happily ever after. And if that's not the ending you were expecting, then remember, just because it's in a book doesn't mean it's true. The end. So yes, nice book all about stories. I hope you enjoyed that and I hope you go and try and read some stories and see whether you think they are true. See you all next time. Bye.